Welcome to Balanced Life with Debi, Carlin, Boyle. Conversations connecting to a healthier you. The show that gives you all the latest and greatest health and wellness information to inspire you to live a life of balance and joy. Debi Carlin Boyle is a health and nutrition coach, personal trainer, and fitness instructor who helps her clients live in balance with everything that feeds us, in addition to the food on our plate. Please welcome your host, Debi Carlin Boyle.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome again to another edition of Balanced Life with Debi Carlin Boyle. I am Conversations, helping to connect you to a healthier life. And we have a good conversation today, and we want you to get involved in the conversation. So before I introduce my wonderful guest, I'm going to give you a phone number. So write this down. It's 323-842-2826. Now, that's a different number than I've been giving out for the last 10 shows because our number here has changed. And we realized last week that people couldn't get through who were trying to call in. So I hope you've got that down, 323-842-2826. You can also become part of the conversation by making a comment or asking a question on our Facebook page, or my Facebook page, which is Fit by Design, also known as Balanced Life by Debi. So go ahead. We'd love for you to become part of this conversation because today we're going to be talking about grief and how to help overcome all different types of grief. So my guest today has a spiritual mentor and ordained minister, speaker, and Amazon best-selling author. Pilkington combines over 30 years of spiritual practice and training to assist those that are living in a state of grief and oftentimes don't realize it. Through her own journey, she discovered that disappointment, unresolved cycles of action, unmet expectations stem from deep-seated belief systems that run our lives unconsciously and govern every decision that we make. Traumatic events, death of loved ones and or pets, and how we perceive these events are directly connected to our belief systems relating to the life-death cycle. Carol works with her clients to become aware of their grief so that they can move through and beyond it to live with more energy and joy. After all, joy and love is our natural state of being. Carol has an end-of-life care certification through the Twilight Brigade, a national nonprofit organization to assist those at the end of life to transition with less fear and help their loved ones get through the process as well. So to discuss today moving beyond grief, will you please welcome my guest, Pilkington, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Thank you for coming today. I really appreciate it. Carol and I share the fact that we're both in a platform, which is a wellness group called the Wellness Universe. And we were lucky enough to meet through one of the meetups that they had, and we got to talk about what we both do, and that's how our connection happened. And I love these platforms to meet people like you who are entrepreneurs and taking their passion and helping others with what they've learned and the education that they've taken themselves through usually something that happened to them that precipitated it and took them to where they are today. So, having said that, let's find out about where you began.
Well, as we were talking Sunday at lunch, I had an experience when I was a child that led me on a path to ask questions that spoke to the nature of our existence, such as who am I and how did I get here?
So where did you grow up? Because
I grew
hear
up in New York.
New York.
Yeah.
I hear that drawl. I was going to say I'm hearing that because my parents are New Yorkers and I grew up in that household, so it's familiar. So how old were you when you had that experience?
I was probably around 9 or 10.
It's very young.
Yeah.
And so it made you question.
Yeah.
What's life all about?
Exactly. What does it mean to be here? What does it mean to be human?
And what did you do with it at that time, being that young? How did you parlay that into anything, or how do you take that question and go with it when you're so young?
That's a really good question, and I really didn't know what to do with it. I held it inside. It was an experience that I had, and I didn't know if anybody else had had anything like that. I really didn't have anybody to talk to about it. I wasn't part of any organized religion, so I couldn't go to a priest or anything like that. And so it just was something that I held in and observed those around me and saw that they were living in a state of sadness and looking for something outside of themselves to fulfill that need for love, to be seen, to be heard. And I didn't have this language, obviously, at that age.
No,
but
but
as
you
I grew
knew what you were looking at.
Yeah, exactly.
People that were searching, people that couldn't figure out, people that were somewhat maybe depressed. And depression comes from that when you try to look for, I mean, it comes from many things. But when you try to look on the outside instead of coming from here first, coming from a loving space and figuring out how to love you and everything you're about, you look for outside ways to define you, to make you better, to make you feel complete, to make you have the definition of why I'm here.
And to fill that void.
That void.
And not even knowing what that void really is.
So what was the turnaround for you?
Well, I did a program in 1980 that started me on a formal path, but then I realized that if that was not sufficient enough to give me the experience that I was really looking for.
What was the program at that time?
It was the Esther training.
Oh, right.
Werner
Okay.
Earhart. Mm-hmm. It turned into the foundation, the Landmark Foundation.
Yes, which is still going on strong.
Right.
Yeah.
But it didn't give me the internal experience that I needed to discover more about my own psyche and my own consciousness until I came upon the Scher Institute of Astrology and Metaphysics in 2001. And it's then that I was able to take my experience and my learning and my own discoveries to another level.
Okay. Is that here this year?
Yes.
It's here in Los Angeles. Is that what brought you to Los Angeles from New
No.
York? Well,
No,
when did
I've been here from New York since 1977.
Okay. What brought you to the West Coast?
I just knew that I belonged here.
Oh,
you
isn't
know,
that funny?
I visited several times.
So many of my guests say that.
Yeah, it's like I found my home. This is where I knew I needed to be to become more of who I am, whatever that meant or whatever that looked like.
Yeah. Interesting. So many people, I don't know what it is about California. I mean, sometimes I think it has to do being the entertainment capital of the world and having lots of opportunity, or the weather. I mean, those are sort of the obvious reasons, but so many people within the field of spirituality and coaching and helping people, you know, getting practices to help people become better versions of themselves come here. It's so many of them.
It's so diverse.
Maybe that's why, so they can help a diverse group of people. Because being a California girl, born and raised right down the street, you know, it fascinates me why people come here who don't seek the entertainment industry, or some of them do, and then they do parlay into coaching. So, but pretty much every single one of my guests had that answer. So you became, so that resonated with you. And then so you became sort of an expert in the field of grief. Was that based on an experience that you had with grief?
Well, basically, what brought me to wanting to talk to people about the process of grief is my own experience over the past 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
I came to realize that in my own experience of my father dying and not being there the moment that he died, I beat myself up for several years for not being there during his last breath. But I came to realize...
So many people I know, again, go through that.
Yeah.
It's really difficult for them to move forward. I have a friend of mine, and I think you're watching the show, so shout out to you, Scott, told me that also he wasn't there for the last breath, and because it was very sudden. And they live with the guilt of that. So tell us how you were able to...
As I was contemplating the nature of why I was feeling so guilty about it, and also what caused me not to be there in the first place. What caused me not to be there for his last breath? I came to the cognition that I just wasn't ready. I just was not ready to see another person that's close to me die.
When you say another, so you've gone through it before with other family
since
members.
I was 6 years old. I've experienced death over a period of years.
So grief was building up inside you, and you couldn't keep the layers going, really.
Well, from that experience with my father, and realizing that it was okay not to be ready. I just realized, it's okay not to be ready. Just own it and take responsibility for that.
Mm-hmm.
It was that point that I was released from that grief, that pain. But grief to me is an accumulative thing. We have a lot of expectations during a life that are not fulfilled. Things that we want to have happen, goals that we set. Things that don't happen in our lives that we put so much intention into, or put our eggs in one basket and we get disappointed. So it's about disappointments and expectations not being met. And it's about losses of all kinds, whether it's relationships, everything.
Yeah.
And we don't have a way to actually work through that grief.
So how do you identify the nature of grief? How would you say that?
I would say that there are a lot of people that can identify it through they're feeling sad all the time. They have to put a face on for the public that everything is okay. Mm-hmm. I'm okay. When really we're not feeling okay. Or when they feel like they're isolating themselves. Isolation is a big thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Also,
part of depression.
Yeah. And also feeling afraid to say anything to anybody. Not being able to sleep, not being able to eat. Mm-hmm. It causes us to not only isolate, but to live in a place of fear.
So once you identify it, what do you think is the best way? Getting right into the nitty gritty here, but I know you have a handbook on this. So what would you say is the best way to handle grief? And I know it's so individual, and it depends on. There are different levels for sure. And you can't minimize anybody going through, whether it's a loss of a pet or a loss of how can you compare a pet to, let's say, a loss of a child? You can't, but you can't deny anybody their level of grief that's happening within inside them. So how would people handle it? And I know there's stages and there's books and there's therapies that are specific to individuals, but if just in general, what should people be looking for and doing?
I know this sounds really strange, but my experience is to fully acknowledge where you are now. Mm-hmm. We want to be there, or we want to be over there, but we often don't pay attention and acknowledge where we are now. To be able to fully acknowledge and accept what we're feeling now is the biggest step of all.
Right.
And it's from that place that we can begin to unravel, if you will, all the threads that lead to all the different areas of our lives that we have experienced sorrow, pain, and grief.
So it's basically allowing ourselves to acknowledge it and then finding the tools to be able to move forward in our lives so we don't lose that joy and that energy, as you describe, that really keep us centered individuals, balanced individuals in a healthy place to move forward in our lives. Because if we keep the grief, I have a friend who lost her mother last year, and her mother was well into her 90s. And I don't think she dealt with it immediately. She was very sad and very upset, but the grief overwhelmed her so much. Her mother was living with her and her husband. And the grief overwhelmed her so much that she went into a very dark place. It almost took her the full year to snap out of it. She's doing better now because she's dealing with the issues of the things that she didn't deal with at the time. And it affected every aspect of her life. Her friendships, her ability to eat, her ability to sleep, her ability to communicate, even with her husband and her close friends. And I train her. The one thing that was constant that she really made sure was that she exercised, just to keep flushing out. But that didn't help her snap out of it right away. She had to work on other things besides just sweating. It's very difficult because life is a series of griefs in different levels. And unless we know how not to take us all the way through the floor, they're going to come at us. They just are.
Well, the thing that makes us go all the way to the floor is the non-acknowledgement of where we are and what we're feeling. And one of the biggest things is to find someone that they can trust, that can hold the space for them to express their feelings and emotions safely and without any condition on it.
Right. No judgments.
No judgment or anything. And oftentimes, we feel that we can't go to our friends because they don't want to deal with it.
And they don't know what to say, or sometimes they say the wrong things, and and then they don't want to upset us, and then we do get upset because we don't know what we want to hear.
And people feel that, oh, why is she still dealing with this? She should be over it now. She should get through it. We tend to think that there should be a timeline, a specific timeline for grief, and there isn't.
I still grieve the death of my father. My father died over 42 years ago. So, every day there's a thought of how I miss him. And it's my way of dealing with it. It doesn't take me into a corner and crying, but I definitely am still dealing with the loss of him every day. And I think you have to acknowledge that. You can't, it never ends. There is no start and finish. There is no...
Well, I don't know if there's necessarily not an end, but there shouldn't be a timeline for it either.
No,
right?
Right.
So I'm just saying that there's no timeline for something to end. And there's a myth out there that there are stages of grief. Mm-hmm. We talk about the 7 stages or the 7 stages.
Elizabeth Kubler.
Yeah,
Ross,
but she's talking about the 7 stages of death, not the 7 stages of grief.
Which grief comes
Very
in many
different.
forms. Yes, I went through a
And it's
very
unique.
big divorce, and my grief was overwhelming. And yet it wasn't dismissed. It definitely wasn't dismissed by my friends or family, but they couldn't possibly know the kind of grief I was going through. And I don't want to compare it to a death of a loved one, but it was a loss. It was a huge loss.
Right.
It was like a death in a way. And so when you say there's no timeline, how does that work? What do you mean?
When I say that, I mean that there's no definite timeline when we should be done with something, or how we should move through it, or when we should stop feeling what we're feeling. You can't put a timeline on our feelings and emotions, but the more we acknowledge them, the more we accept them and see them in each and every moment, we lessen the time that it grabs us in, moments that we don't expect. My experience is that when I acknowledge what I'm feeling in any given moment about anything, it kind of releases that valve. It's like a release valve where something is let go of.
And it's almost a relief, like
it is.
Like a relief. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
It's not like
so you're
it actually is.
acknowledging, and it helps you move forward.
Yes, it does.
Wow. And do you help your clients do that too? And they come to you sometimes specifically because of loss,
Yes.
and then that they're grieving. and you help them through those. We don't want to, do we call them stages that you help them through?
No.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. Whatever a person is feeling, whatever their
Acknowledge
emotions are,
it.
whether it's even anger. Some people are feeling anger or abandonment when a person that they love, a parent or someone, dies. They feel abandoned. What's the nature of the abandonment? I help people go into the nature of the feeling and emotion itself, so that there's also sometimes shame and guilt around those kinds of feelings.
Absolutely.
About feeling anger. Why? I feel bad that I have anger. I feel that I shouldn't have anger. You have every right to be angry. If that's what you're feeling, feel it, but do it consciously.
Especially in divorce. I mean, because
Sure.
you're usually angered at, you're grieving from the loss, but at the same time you're angered at what's going down, because divorce can be, as I, again, can attest to, nasty. And so the anger will take you down, boy. It will make you sick if you don't acknowledge it and deal with it. And is that what you mean when we talk about multi-layers of grief?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Finding where your client is at specifically, layer by layer, and then dealing with each layer individually. So important.
As a whole, actually. It's not just individually, because it's not just zeroing in on the anger or zeroing in on the guilt. It's the whole process in and of itself. So we're dealing with whatever emotion is coming up at any given time and dealing with it and seeing what the nature of it is. But I work with people from a holistic place.
And that's, so from the wellness place. So we make sure that they take care of themselves during this grief process. We're down to our last 5 minutes, but I want to go through briefly like what it is through helping people get through their grief, how they get back to that joy and energy that we talked about at the top of the show once you work through it. Does it feel like you work with clients for a certain period of time, or, I know we're not putting a timeline on it, but how do you feel like it? Yes, they're themselves again and they can move forward, and now they have some tools or some understanding to help them get through the next loss in their life.
I call it impartial observing. It's a form of living meditation.
Oh, interesting. How does that work?
Basically, it's what I've been saying this whole show, is simply observing where you are now, allowing it to be. And the more that we do that, the quicker we move through it.
Okay.
And the more is released.
Okay. So you are saying that.
Yeah.
I like that. Say it again, what it's called?
Impartial
observing meditation.
Right. It's basically it's a type of meditation. It's a living meditation. So it's basically observing where we are now and allowing it to be without pushing it away, judging it, or feeling that we shouldn't have it.
Yeah.
We have a lot of shoulds and shouldn'ts,
Yeah.
right?
No shame involved on it,
Yes.
no judgment, no anger, no fear. So does that mean that a person who's going through this needs to really stop, kind of move away from all the noise and stop and meditate about this? Is it an actually, physical?
It's actually a way of being in the world.
Okay.
With whatever is coming up now. What's coming up now? Oh, I feel sadness, and still continuing to go about our day.
Yes.
It's
just acknowledging that
it's not easy to do. It's a muscle that has to be worked.
So you have to practice.
Yeah.
So you teach your clients to practice using that muscle,
Yes.
using that conscious meditation that you're doing within the realm of living your life.
Exactly.
Per se.
You still have to live in the world, right?
This is very potent, very big stuff, very good. So in the few minutes that we have left, let's tell my audience how they can reach you if they're going through something, how they can buy or get your pamphlet. I think it's on your website, actually. So we're going to give your website, your Facebook pages, any information on anything that you have coming up. And you have a book out. What's your book called?
My book is The Itty Bitty Book of Astrology, 15 Questions People Ask About Astrology.
Oh, very cool. And it's on Amazon, right?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us your website.
My website is movingbeyondgrief.com, and they can get my guide there. And they can also book a discovery call with me if they would like to have a conversation with me and see where that might go, and if they would like to work with me.
I saw that. You have a phone number on your website
Yes.
as well, and you also have a little place where people can put in a question in their email, and it will pop up to you as well.
Exactly.
And what's your Facebook if people want
It's
to find you there?
Heart-Centered Astrology and More.
Okay.
So it's facebook.com/Heart-Centered Astrology and More.
Wow. Very good. And final words that you would like to leave my audience with based on what we're talking about today, based on moving forward from grief.
Yeah, I would just say, don't be ashamed of how you're feeling. Don't feel that there's a timeline on what you're feeling. And find a safe place to go to talk to someone about what you're feeling and going through. And just allow yourself to be wherever you are. You shouldn't have to be someplace else other than where you are now.
That's great. Acknowledge that it's all right.
Yes.
To feel the way you feel, when you feel it, how you feel it. Love it. Thank you, Carol. Really good words of wisdom to end with. I hope this helped you. And if you want to continue the conversation, do go to my Facebook page, Fit by Design. Ask a question. Carol will answer you right there. Or Carol also announced her Facebook page, so you can go there. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. And as always, remember to keep finding ways to connect to a healthier you. Bye, everybody. Thank you, Carol. Thank you.
I
Bye.
enjoyed it.